very easy for casting directors to say, yeah, we know Judge, and we know that's Billy Rosewood, and that's who he is.
Them in 2 seconds flat. It's their face, the way they delivered a line, their whole vibe. And Judge Reinhold, he was absolutely one of those guys. He could make you laugh without even trying, and he kept popping up in the most massive movies of that era. But then somewhere down the line, he sort of faded from the spotlight, leaving a whole lot of us asking the exact same question. So today, we're finally going to get into it. What in the world happened to Judge Reinhold? Let's get into the name, his origins, and that nickname that followed him forever. His birth name is actually Edward Ernest Reinhold Jr. He was born May 21st, 1957, in Wilmington, Delaware. That happens to be the very same city, believe it or not, that gave us the incredible Elizabeth Shue. His dad, Edward Ernest Reinhold Sr., was a trial lawyer and a graduate of Harvard Law School, no less. The family was on the move quite a bit when he was a kid, going from Delaware all the way to Fredericksburg, Virginia, where he went to James Monroe High School, and then moving once more to Martin County, Florida, just before his junior year started. That nickname Judge came directly from his father, and it happened fast. Not even 2 weeks after he was born, Edward Sr. looked at his infant son's surprisingly stern face. And this very serious expression made him think the baby looked just like a judge he knew from his work in the legal world. The name became so permanent that now most people who know him probably have no clue his given name is actually Edward. After finishing high school, Reinhold went after an acting career by way of higher education, first attending Mary Washington College and then Palm Beach State College, which back in those days was called Palm Beach Junior College. He also spent time studying at the prestigious North Carolina School of the Arts, which is known as one of the top conservatory-style programs for training actors who are truly serious about the craft. He jumped headfirst into his on-screen career before he'd even finished his formal education, which really says a lot about the kind of restless energy he had as a young man. It also speaks volumes about his self-assurance. Getting into the North Carolina School of the Arts wasn't some kind of fluke. You had to audition, show total commitment, and have a deep-seated belief that acting was a legitimate craft that deserved serious, dedicated training. Reinhold showed up there already knowing he was ready to work, and by the time he left, he knew exactly how to do it professionally. His very first time on screen was in 1979 when he got a part in an episode of the TV series Wonder Woman, playing a guy by the name of Jeff Gordon. It was a bit part, really, the kind of thing that doesn't generate buzz, but means the world to a young actor trying to get his foot in the door. After that, he landed a lead role in the 1980 adventure movie Running Scared, followed by a supporting role in the huge 1981 military comedy Stripes, working with Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. Stripes! That movie was a certified blockbuster. Even in a smaller role, Reinhold was in the same rooms with people who were literally defining the culture of the time. But absolutely none of that could have prepared anybody for what was coming in 1982. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. This was the role that truly launched him. If you're old enough, you can probably remember exactly where you were the first time you saw Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It was directed by Amy Heckerling and based on Cameron Crowe's screenplay. The movie was like an earthquake in American film, a teen comedy that also managed to be shockingly honest about what it's like to be an adolescent. Of course, it had Sean Penn as the legendary Spicoli, but it also featured this incredible cast that had Phoebe Cates, Jennifer Jason Lee Forrest Whitaker, a young Nicolas Cage, Anthony Edwards, and Eric Stoltz. And right there with them was Judge Reinhold as Brad Hamilton. Brad is a high school senior just trying to keep a string of crummy fast food jobs, while his entire social and romantic life completely falls apart around him. He's not the cool kid, definitely not the rebel. He's not the one who has it all figured out. He's just a regular teenager trying to make it through, and Reinhold portrayed him with such an easy, warm, and natural style that you just instantly liked the guy. The part demanded he be great at physical comedy while also showing some real, genuine emotional depth, and Reinhold absolutely nailed both. He'd later make a joke about how he thought his own career was about to explode after that movie, only to stand by and watch Sean Penn's career blast off into the stratosphere instead. It was a classic self-deprecating comment and maybe a little unfair to his own success, but it pointed to a certain truth about the way Hollywood operates. Because Fast Times was such an ensemble piece, it kickstarted a whole bunch of careers, but they certainly didn't all take off at the same speed or altitude. And the movie itself. Its reputation has only gotten bigger over the years. In 2000, the American Film Institute listed it as one of the top 100 American comedies ever made. Then in 2005, it was officially chosen for preservation in the Library of Congress's National Film Registry. So for an actor who joked about getting the short end of the stick when it came to breaking out, Reinhold's name is now forever linked to one of the most culturally important American movies of the entire decade. What Fast Times really did for Reinhold was cement his reputation as a dependable and genuinely talented comedic actor. He became the kind of guy casting directors kept in mind, and in 1984 that reputation was about to pay off. Big time. We're basically just kind of like scavengers waiting for the first failure so we can go. Then came Beverly Hills Cop, the chemistry that pretty much defined a decade. But the story of how that movie even got made starts, strangely enough, with Sylvester Stallone. You have to picture it, the 1984 film was first dreamed up as a Stallone action vehicle, and Judge Reinhold had already been cast as Detective Billy Rosewood when the whole thing was still a hard-edged, gritty thriller. But then Stallone walked. He left the production to go make Cobra, and the entire character of Axel Foley was completely overhauled the moment Eddie Murphy signed on. All of a sudden, a tough guy action movie morphed into something else entirely, and Detective Billy Rosewood, that earnest, almost innocent Beverly Hills Cop tasked with shadowing this fast-talking detective from Detroit, became one of the most iconic supporting characters of the entire decade. That spark between Murphy and Reinhold was instant and totally authentic. Murphy was the agent of chaos, the motor-mouthed comedic genius. Reinhold provided the perfectly straight-faced sincerity that made every punchline land. The thing is, Rosewood was never the butt of the joke. He was simply the honest, decent cop who actually grew to like Axel Foley. He was a guy who genuinely tried to do the right thing, and his wide-eyed enthusiasm made him endearing, not just some ridiculous caricature. Beverly Hills Cop hit theaters in December of 1984 and ended up as the highest-grossing film of the year, blowing past even Ghostbusters and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It wasn't merely a hit, it was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Both of those films have since been honored with a selection to the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, recognized as culturally and historically significant works. And Reinhold was a massive part of that entire legacy. He came back as Billy Rosewood in Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 1987, and then once more in Beverly Hills Cop 3 back in 1994. See, Billy Rosewood was never just a simple sidekick. Reinhold gave the character a real inner world, a feeling that Rosewood operated with his own values, his own moral code, and a kind of loyalty that went way deeper than just rank or procedure. Audiences really connected with that. Rosewood evolved into one of those rare supporting roles people remember just as vividly as the star. There's a fascinating side note to the original casting. Reinhold himself has said he'd already signed his contract for Billy Rosewood long before Murphy was even part of the conversation, back when it was a straight action project. He had committed himself to a movie that didn't even have a star, and then Eddie Murphy walked in and the entire world of the film changed around him. That bit of history just adds a whole other layer of complexity to what the franchise ultimately became. Flying high and then crashing back down, the mid-1980s were very, very good to Judge Reinhold. After the success of Beverly Hills Cop, he was handed starring roles in a whole string of films: Ruthless 66 in 1985, Head Office also in 1985, and Offbeat in 1986. While none of them were runaway smashes, they proved that the industry was absolutely willing to gamble on him as a leading man. In 1986, he appeared in Ruthless People, sharing the screen with Danny DeVito, Bette Midler, and Helen Slater. It was a wickedly dark crime comedy directed by the Zucker-Abraham Zucker team, and it was genuinely hysterical. Reinhold's part was Ken Kessler, a completely hapless stereo salesman who accidentally gets tangled up in a kidnapping plot. The movie was a definite commercial success, and it demonstrated that Reinhold could more than hold his own in a cast full of heavy hitters. It's important to remember that during this period, Reinhold was on magazine covers. He was a guest on late-night television, and he was being talked about as one of the major comedy stars of his generation. From the outside looking in, his career path seemed like it was a straight shot to the moon. The films themselves weren't always hitting the mark, but his name meant something powerful. He had entered that exclusive category of actors where audiences would go see a movie just because he was in it, not because of what it was about. That is a very short list in any era. Then 1988 rolled around, and with it came Vice Versa, a body swap comedy where Reinhold starred alongside Fred Savage. The whole concept of a father and son switching bodies wasn't new even back then, and the movie landed in a market already packed with similar flicks. It tanked. Reinhold has been incredibly frank about what happened afterward, and specifically about his own role in the fallout. In his own words, "That was really the end of my highfalutin Hollywood career. That's when the phone stopped ringing." But he's been just as honest about the reasons why. He's admitted that during this time he was spoiled, arrogant, and extremely demanding. He says he developed a reputation for being difficult on set and that, frankly, he deserved it. He has said it directly with no sugarcoating. "I was very demanding, had an overblown image of who I was, and got a reputation for being difficult, and rightfully so." That kind of raw honesty is startling. Hollywood is absolutely filled with people who blame anything and everything else for their own setbacks. Reinhold looked back at that exact same time in his life and concluded that the problem was him. He relocated to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and has called those years a profound and agonizing period of self-examination. In interviews, he's mentioned that the experience of confronting the damage he'd done and finally accepting responsibility for it all changed him in profound ways that took him years to truly comprehend. He has discussed that time using the language of actual transformation, not the vague, cliché vocabulary of Hollywood redemption stories. He had to face specific actions, specific reputations he had earned, and the specific relationships that were fractured by his own behavior, and he worked his way through all of it. When he came out on the other side of that experience, the man who re-emerged was different, quieter, more deliberate, and by all reports, a whole lot easier to be with. "I literally just chased a girl into my high school drama class back in 10th grade. That was the full extent of my motivation." It was time to get back to work in the 90s and the years that followed. The early 1990s found Reinhold consistently employed, taking roles in a variety of smaller films and television shows. You could see him in Daddy's Dine, Who's Got the Will Enid is Sleeping in 1991, and Rosalie Goes Shopping back in 1989. Sure, they weren't the massive blockbuster movies he was known for earlier in his career, but he was employed. And through it all, he was developing an entirely new kind of patience. Then, 1994 delivered two very important roles. The first was his return in Beverly Hills Cop 3, which brought him back together with Eddie Murphy for the third chapter of a series he had helped launch from the very start. And the second, The Santa Claus, that beloved Disney holiday comedy featuring Tim Allen. Reinhold was cast as Drs. Neil Miller, the new man in the life of Allen's ex-wife, a kind, somewhat goofy, and perpetually optimistic character who served as a fantastic comic counterpoint. The film became a massive hit, introducing Reinhold to a completely new, younger generation of fans who knew nothing about his work in Fast Times or Beverly Hills Cop. He returned to the role for the Santa Claus 2 in 2002 and again for the Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause in 2006. During this time, television also became a very successful space for him. In 1994, he made a guest appearance on Seinfeld in the two-episode The Raincoats arc, playing a guy named Aaron, a young man who develops a strangely intense fondness for Jerry's parents. Infamous for standing uncomfortably close during every single conversation, a character the show would forever cement in our minds as the close talker. That performance snagged Reinhold an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Comedy Series. It's a very small role, basically just a recurring joke, but he performed it with such unwavering, clueless honesty that his character became one of the show's most fondly remembered. In hindsight, it was also a pretty clear indication that Reinhold had found a new professional rhythm. The drive to be the leading man that defined his mid-1980s career had morphed into something more versatile, an openness to take smaller parts, to get laughs on someone else's show, and to believe that one perfectly played scene in a great series can outlive a forgotten starring role any day. The Seinfeld close talker is remembered far better today than most of the films Reinhold starred in right after Beverly Hills Cop, and then came Arrested Development and The Self-Aware Years. If the Seinfeld role showed Reinhold was okay with being the punchline, his recurring part on Arrested Development took that idea and ran with it straight into the wild territory of absurdist humor. In the Fox comedy series, which originally ran from 2003 to 2006 before Netflix picked it up, Reinhold played a comically exaggerated version of himself. On the show, his character hosted a courtroom reality show very much in the style of Judge Judy, which was called Mock Trial with Judge Reinhold. The series absolutely delighted in the sheer comedy of a real actor named Judge playing a character who is, you guessed it, also named Judge. This kind of self-deprecating humor was totally in line with the show's sensibilities, and Reinhold jumped in with zero vanity. Taking that part on Arrested Development revealed something crucial about where he was as a person in the mid-2000s. He was no longer the type of actor who needed to protect a certain image or hold out for specific kinds of roles. He was totally willing to play a version of himself who was teased, simplified, and absurd, and he did it all with what was clearly genuine fun. It's exactly the kind of move that actors struggling with career anxiety simply can't bring themselves to make. Reinhold, however, made it all look so easy, and that probably means the deep personal work he'd put in during the decade before was very, very real. Now for his personal life, the first marriage, the difficult years, and the woman who changed absolutely everything. Judge Reinhold married casting director Carrie Frazier on November 1st, 1985. The marriage didn't even last a full year, with the divorce finalized in 1986. The couple had no children. This was happening right at the supposed professional high point of his career, and as he himself has said, it was also when he was the absolute worst version of himself. The years after Vice Versa were incredibly challenging, both on a personal and professional level, so he moved away to Santa Fe. He took time to reflect. He confronted things about himself that were frankly very hard to look at. Then, at a party in Los Angeles sometime in the late 1990s, he saw Amy Miller across a packed room, but she left before they could be introduced. So he followed her car, managed to track her down through mutual acquaintances, and finally got a chance to meet her properly. They were married just 6 months later on January 8, 2000, in the town of Scott, Arkansas. Reinhold has said that she's basically the real-life equivalent of Billy Rosewood, the ever-loyal partner and stabilizing force to Axel Foley. He has stated in no uncertain terms that he doesn't know where he'd be without her. He would be completely lost. Amy, who was raised in Little Rock, Arkansas, is a screenwriter. The two of them co-authored a book and a related project called Be Still, which was eventually produced as a DVD narrated by Reinhold himself. They have set up their home in Little Rock, making a very intentional choice to get away from the relentless pressure of Los Angeles. Leaving Hollywood wasn't a retreat for Judge Reinhold, it was a deliberate choice, and it's a move he has discussed openly without a hint of regret. Los Angeles, after all, had built him up and then stripped much of that away. In Arkansas, he found something entirely different, a culture where the work you put in and the kind of person you were mattered far more than a list of film credits. Then in February of 2013, their daughter, Haley Rose Reinhold, was born into this new life. But then came the airport incident and the startlingly honest fallout that followed. It happened in December 2016. Judge Reinhold, then 59 years old, was arrested at Dallas Love Field Airport and charged with misdemeanor disorderly conduct. His carry-on bag had set off an alarm at the TSA checkpoint, which led to agents asking him for a full pat-down search. Reinhold refused, got into a heated argument with the agents, and as reports later detailed, ended up taking his shirt off and using profane language during the whole confrontation. He was hauled off to the Dallas County Jail and let go the next morning, but what unfolded next was, in its own way, much more revealing than the arrest itself. Reinhold put out a formal written statement that was completely devoid of any excuses. He described the preceding 48 hours as the most unusual, hair-raising, and regrettable 2 days of my life, and flatly admitted that he should have known better. He offered a direct apology to the Dallas Police Department, while also noting he'd been having a bad reaction to some medication he was taking for a respiratory infection that week. But he made it clear this was just context, not an attempt to justify his behavior. He explained that he was deeply embarrassed, especially because, as he put it himself, he'd benefited from 3 decades of friendship and support from law enforcement thanks to the Beverly Hills Cop movies. The official charge was just a Class C misdemeanor. He agreed to a deferred adjudication deal, which meant the charges would be dropped entirely after 90 days. No conviction ever went on his record. It was just a single incident, a brief moment of terrible judgment, and he took full ownership of it. For a man who had worked so hard in his 30s to learn how to be accountable for his actions, it must have felt like a painful regression to an earlier version of himself. But his response to it, the directness, the complete lack of spin, the way he acknowledged his fault without trying to deflect blame, was telling. It proved that the man who had emerged from all those difficult years in Santa Fe was still very much there under the surface. Some of us learn our lessons once and for all, others have to keep relearning them. Reinhold, it seems, always understood that this kind of personal work is a job that never truly ends. Beverly Hills Cop Axel F., a homecoming at 66. In 2024, Judge Reinhold stepped back into the very role that had defined the most triumphant era of his entire career in Beverly Hills Cop. Axel F., the new film, directed by Mark Malloy, premiered on Netflix on July 3, 2024, with Eddie Murphy returning as the iconic Axel Foley. John Ashton was back as Taggart Bronson Pinchot returned to play Surge, and there was Judge Reinhold, once again, as Detective Billy Rosewood. A little older now, certainly, and now working as a private investigator following a dispute with the Beverly Hills Police Department, but he was still the same earnest, good-hearted guy that audiences had connected with 4 decades earlier. The movie shot to the top of Netflix's charts, becoming its most streamed film for almost 2 weeks right after its debut, pulling in a massive 41 million views in just its first 5 days. For a movie franchise that kicked off way back in 1984, that kind of number is nothing short of extraordinary. Reinhold has talked with real warmth about what making the film meant to him personally. He's mentioned that Billy Rosewood isn't the young, naive kid anymore, and that he wanted to show that the character had developed a harder edge over the years without losing his soul. He has also shared that the whole experience of getting back together with Murphy and the rest of the cast was a source of pure joy that he finds hard to fully describe. There's something truly touching when you think about the fact that 4 entire decades separated the first movie from this 4th one, and the core fan base that tuned in on Netflix to see it had, for the most part, been carrying these characters around in their heads for the better part of their adult lives. For an actor who spent a huge chunk of the 1990s just hoping the phone might ring again, the incredible reception for Axel F. was the ultimate validation. Poignantly, it would also be the final screen credit for John Ashton, the man who played Taggart in 3 of the 4 Beverly Hills Cop movies. Ashton had skipped Beverly Hills Cop 3 back in 1994, but he came back for Axel F., giving audiences one final memorable performance as the cherished Taggart. He passed away on September 26, 2024 in Fort Collins, Colorado, following a difficult fight with cancer. So where is he now? Judge Reinhold is 67 years old. He still lives in Little Rock, Arkansas with his wife Amy and their daughter Haley Rose, who is now 12. He calls his life there grounded and deeply fulfilling a deliberate choice over the social treadmill of Los Angeles. It's a place where he's discovered the type of community and sense of belonging that Hollywood was never quite able to offer him. Little Rock happens to be Amy's hometown, and Reinhold has spoken fondly about how he has become a part of her family's world. They're a world of entrepreneurs, artists, and the regular people who make life work without any need for a spotlight. He often mentions an observation from his father-in-law about trust, that in a place like Arkansas, people for the most part are simply trustworthy. In Los Angeles, the game is always trying to spot the 2 people in the room who aren't putting on an act. That idea has almost become a life philosophy for him. His mother, Regina Celeste Reinhold, was a force of nature, living all the way to be 100 years old before she passed away in 2023. He continues to be a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, an organization he was invited into way back in 1987. His career spans more than 75 roles in both movies and television, a figure that paints a picture of someone who just never quit, even when the spotlight wasn't as bright. And 2 of those movies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Beverly Hills Cop, are now officially preserved in the Library of Congress's National Film Registry. His was a classic Hollywood story. He went from being a young aspiring actor slinging frozen yogurt in Brentwood and once serving some to Angie Dickinson to becoming one of the most recognizable faces of the 1980s. He soared to the top, then he hit the ground, and he meticulously pieced his life back together, not with some sensational comeback, but with sheer patience. He did it with a completely new set of priorities, and with the unwavering support of a woman he bravely followed to her car across a parking lot one night in the late 1990s. You could easily tell the Judge Reinhold story as a kind of warning for others. You know the one, the brilliant career that flamed out too soon, the reputation for being difficult that slammed doors shut, and the messy headlines that inevitably followed. But focusing on that narrative ignores so much of the real story. It completely skips over the Santa Fe years, both what that time cost him and what it ultimately gave back. It leaves out the marriage that saved him the daughter he adores and the peaceful life he built for himself in Arkansas, totally on his own terms. That version forgets the Emmy nomination and his brilliant self-parody on Arrested Development. It overlooks the iconic close talker on Seinfeld that people still reference, and it definitely doesn't account for 41 million Netflix streams in just 5 days, 40 years after he first wore Billy Rosewood's badge. And then in the summer of 2024, 4 decades after the first Beverly Hills Cop shattered every box office record imaginable. He put that Billy Rosewood badge on one last time, and by all accounts it felt just like coming home. That right there is the complete picture of Judge Reinhold, a man who touched the sky in the 1980s, experienced a brutal fall, and clawed his way back not through some grand Hollywood reinvention, but by quietly becoming a better man. If you like this story, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. We have many more stories just like this one headed your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single one. We will catch you in the next video.